Hey, everybody, and we're live today with a topic that I'm super interested in. And I don't know where we'll go today, but we got Joel Ryals from Fortress Canine here, and he is a protection dog trainer. I've heard him on some other shows and know a little bit about his background, but y'all may not know too much. And I thought I'd ask him first. Just, Joel, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into training dogs, and what even is a protection dog?
Absolutely. So I'm getting a little bit of an echo on. Let me see. I'm going to shut that off real quick and see if that helps. So, yeah, a protection dog is different than. I must have a YouTube video open somewhere. So let me take these off while I'm
Yeah,
talking.
we're not
So
hearing
a
the echo at
protection
all.
dog is different than a police dog or a military dog because those dogs are trained to be in specific types of combat, and they're also typically working alone, and they also typically don't really care with those dogs whether or not they're aggressive when they're not supposed to be, right? So a lot of times, basically, they want dogs that are just going to go smash things, and the handlers will kind of hold them away from things they're not supposed to smash when they're moving in a crowd. Get back, don't come near my dog, when they're moving around. And then they just point them at a target and let them go, and they go do their thing. With a protection dog, at least the way we're describing it, is these dogs are designed to be in public, move with you wherever you go, be around your family. You're able to have friends and family come over to your house, all that sort of thing. And so they have to be what we call stable, right? So if your dog is not stable, then they're not safe around other dogs, other people, and all of that sort of thing. So we train dogs that are stable, but also are able to protect. And so it's kind of like switching on a light switch and switching off a light switch. And so I got into that way back in 2003. We had my first marriage. We had just had twins, and I just got back from my first deployment. And my then wife was like, hey, if you're going to be gone so much, I want to have a protection dog around. So I'd never really gotten into that world. So we started looking around. We found a company in Canada. We purchased a puppy from them and a week of training. I loaded up on an airplane and flew with my dog in cab for the first time. I spent about 3 weeks training with it before I went up there. And so we get up there, and I really just hit it off with these guys. So within my first training session, I had a little German Shepherd male. So he was biting. He was obedient when we got there. And I was there for a week. So on Wednesday morning, we would always come into the farmhouse and sit at the table in the morning and kind of chit chat for a few minutes. And then we'd go out back and train. And so we're sitting there that morning, and I said, yeah, on your website, you guys have pictures of you training around fire and in the water and doing all these kind of crazy things. Are we going to do any of that while we're here? And in the kind of the corner of my eye, I see the two police officers that were there finishing up their 6-week training course. And they're both like, shut up, stop talking. Right? And I'm like, what are you guys talking about? And so we called the head trainer, we called him Chief. And he just kind of gets this. He's a Vietnam MACV-SOG veteran. And so he gets this kind of like, evil grin on his face. And he's like, boys, we'll be training late tonight. And both those two guys were like, we're injured, because that's one of his things. If you're injured, you don't have to train, right? So that evening we go out there, and he's got this little pond, and there's one bush on a pond, and there's some metal bridges across it, and we do some different things in it. But it's stocked with crayfish. And he says, all right, so here's what you two are going to do. It's me and his son, right? So me and his son are the only ones training. We're both about the same age. We both have a dog. And he's like, you boys are going to get into that pond. And when I'm going to walk over to this van that we use for like explosive detection and stuff, I'm going to come back. When I get back, I better not find you in this pond. Well, there's only one place to hide. It's under that bush over there, right? And so as soon as he turns to walk, his son's like, follow me. So we get under there, and we proceed to spend, and this is probably September in Canada, right? So the water is cold enough that if you're there long enough and not moving around, you start to go hypothermic. And so we spent probably 4 hours in that pond, mostly not moving, getting maced and pepper sprayed and pissed on. And he has these floating metal containers that he puts straw in and lights them on fire. And then at the end of that, we had to go do an obstacle course. And we're like 15 feet off the ground on these 8x8 beams. And so after finishing all that night, they were basically like, all right, you're in. anytime you want to train, you get on a plane and come and you train with us. And so every 4-day weekend for the next 12 years, and I was in the Army, so there's a lot of 4-day weekends in the Army. And so for the next 12 years, every 4-day weekend, I was up there training, and that's kind of how all this got started.
Were the dogs in the water with you?
Say that again?
Were the dogs in the water with you? Did you have your dogs?
Yes. The dogs were in the water with me. Yep.
Got it.
And
wow.
I'm going to go ahead and shut down a bunch of these windows that I have.
Yeah, he's getting a little bit of an echo. Okay, so the bigger question, though, is, I mean, before you started training dogs, had you done any training, or was it just sort of out of the blue, I'm going to go learn how to do this?
So I hadn't done any training with the dogs. Apparently, I found the one that was causing the echo because it's gone on my end. I'd been in the military, so I'd done some military training. I'd done some waterborne operations stuff on my own. I went through airborne school, and then your basic standard military training and things like that. But I'd never done anything with dogs specifically. We had dogs growing up, like a lot of people. So I knew some real basic stuff about how to introduce, how to get a dog to come to you and stuff like that. But literally, when they sent the puppy, this was like VHS tape came with it. Right. So there was a VHS tape in one of the little boxes they were in, strapped to the top of the crate when I picked them up at the airport. And it was, this is how you train your puppy. And so I watched this tape, and it's basically, hey, you introduce the command, right? You let the dog know what they're supposed to do. So what does sit mean when you use seats? So when you say seats, what does that mean to the dog, right? So you got to show them what seats means. And then you start correcting them for not going into that position. So he just kind of walked through this with the basic commands. And so as soon as I got the dog, I watched the video. I started doing the stuff in the video. And when we showed up and the dog was obedient, they were like, how did you get this dog to do all this? Like in a month, that you had the dog for a month and you came up here and trained, how is it able to do all this stuff? And I'm like, I just followed your video. Like, you said, do this, I did it. Like it was easy. And I guess they're used to people, getting these things and then not following through, not doing the things they're supposed to do, that sort of thing. I did immerse myself in it. Like I was the guy who, when I come home from work in the evening, especially if it was pouring down rain, and we were at Fort Stewart at the time, so you get a lot of afternoon rain and things like that. If I came home from work and it was raining, I would go in the front door, grab my dogs, and go out the back door, and I'd be gone for 2 hours crawling through the mud. And that's just what we would do. And so I really did kind of embrace the whole thing. And we had a big militaristic kind of a focus at the time, but we still had a high emphasis on the stability. Because in our view, the way that I was brought into the world, I say our view, at the time it was their view that I was, kind of coming into, but was, you should be able to do anything with your dog, and your dog should never bite a team member. Your dog should never engage with another dog. The mentor of my mentor, supposedly, I never met him, was the Nazi SS battalion commander from World War II. So they had 300 canines, and they, were running as a unit, running major operations with canines. So it was a big deal to be able to have a lot of dogs together, a lot of protection, bite trained military working type dogs together, and not have them have any kind of negative interactions. So that was a big thing from the very beginning. And so when I started getting into family protection dogs, I was like, well, this is just how everybody should be. So I watched the videos and the pictures of the military using dogs now, which is awesome that they're getting more into the canine programs, but they have to muzzle their dogs when they jump. They have to muzzle their dogs when they do helo casting and things like that. And there's a lot of dangers for the dog associated in doing those things. Plus the fact that if you land in a hot zone, you're trying to take a muzzle off a dog while you're getting shot at. That's, a lot of distraction you don't need. So for us, we were always like, rappel with the dogs, no muzzles. Like, we only ever put muzzles on dogs to do muzzle work with a dog, which is a specific type of bite work, so that the dog you're able to take all your protective equipment off, and the dog's able to hit you, and you're able to fall down and do things that I can't do in a suit without risk getting bit in the head and neck, because our dogs will target head and neck when people go to the ground. So it's one of those things where, this was just, I immersed myself into it, and it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, and it just kind of became my lifestyle.
Okay. So we take questions as we go, by the way, Joel. Here's one for John. Hello, Mr. Willis. How is the one called Baby Head?
It has absolutely nothing to do with this video. So go over to one of my videos and we'll have a conversation sometime. This is dogs here. Okay.
Can dogs be too old to train for live fire? I think this is one version of when's an old dog too old to train?
Yeah, it's not really about whether the dog is too old or not. A lot of the depending factors on whether you're going to be able to do that are the dog's foundation. And if it had a strong foundation, it will probably be able to be trained in that way. A couple things is my philosophy on dogs being around gunfire is if you're wearing hearing protection, they should probably be wearing hearing protection. And they have a lot of hearing protection available now for dogs. Rex Specs makes some. A company called Muffs makes some. And there's two helmet companies, K9 Helm and Dark Systems, that both make helmets with attachable hearing protection that attach into the ear portions of the dog. So if you're going to be shooting live fire around a dog, you should probably start them off with hearing protection, just like you have. And if you're going to pressure test them, that's what we call it when you do it without hearing protection. If I'm pressure testing the dog, I'm doing the same thing. So if we're either both have hearing protection or we both don't have hearing protection. And then you start the dogs with light rounds. So 22s are a good way to start the dogs with. And what I usually recommend is go to a range where it's mostly people firing 22s and handguns outside, not an indoor range, and park in the parking lot and just do obedience with your dog in that area where you're far enough away from the gunfire that you really don't need hearing protection, but the dog can hear it. And see how they react. And if they're just kind of like, oh yeah, there's some noise over there, but it's not a big deal, then they're probably got a good foundation and strong enough nerves to be able to move into live fire. If you take them there and they're stressed, just work obedience, and they'll either go, okay, I'm going to come into this obedience and I'll get used to that, or they're going to go, holy shit, no, I'm still totally stressed out. And after 2 or 3 sessions of that, if they're still like, trying to bolt and run for it every time a round goes off, then I wouldn't push that dog any farther. I would just say, if we want to do live fire, we're going to get another dog for that.
Okay, Ontario, go ahead.
Do they hear better than us?
Well, they hear different pitches than we do. So one of the things we did when I was training up north was we did a counter sniper training session. And I went around to multiple sniper competitions throughout the U.S. and volunteered to be OPFOR and hunt their snipers. And one of the things, the way that dogs find snipers the easiest is via hearing. So snipers are always strapping down all the metal and anything that clicks and clacks on their equipment. So when they're moving around, it's not making any noise. Well, it's only not making noise that humans can hear. But a lot of times there's these little squeaks and movements and creaks and things in the equipment that we're not detecting, but the dogs can hear. And they can hear it even a quarter, half a mile away. So we would find high places, and I would just sit and I would observe, and I would mostly watch my dog. And they'd be sitting there just kind of chilled and relaxed, and all of a sudden they go. And whenever that happened, ears up, focused on an area, we would start focusing in on that area. And probably 9 times out of 10, sure enough, there they go, moving through the woods. We'd watch them until they moved past a landmark, and then we would go and track from that landmark into wherever they were. So it's not that they necessarily hear so much better than we do, because you can make a dog deaf. Too much gunfire around a dog. I learned that the hard way with my first dog, and I got multiple buddies that were, former SEALs and things like that they're like, oh yeah, she's hardcore, we're going to take her around gunfire. And now the dog's like, what? Can't hear anything. So it's all hand and arm signals for those dogs.
So is the hearing protection for K9, is it amplified in stereo like ours is?
There is one brand, and I ordered it, but it hasn't come in yet, that does that. And it's the Dark Systems brand that makes that helmet. And they call it active hearing protection. And it's set up kind of like the Walker or the, what's the other brand, the real high end one?
MSA, Sordens, Comtact 2.
Yeah, so they have the microphone on the outside, so it picks up ambient noise, and then it shuts off whenever there's a high enough noise that it would cause hearing protection or hearing damage.
Because that would actually be an advantage. I mean, that would amplify.
Yes. And on the one they have, the way they advertise it is they actually have, 3.5 millimeter plug-in for listen-only radio communications as well, which was a concept I had way back when that, I didn't have any kind of ability to develop. Was we should have a way to communicate with the dogs via radio, so we can communicate with them at a distance without having to yell or have something strapped to a vest where everybody that's anywhere near them can hear it. And so Dark Systems has developed that. I have it en route because they're actually over in Europe somewhere. I think it's Holland, but they're over there somewhere, and it's en route right now. And I'm excited to give it a try and test it out.
Are you going to make videos about that when you get it?
I am. I'm actually going to do a side-by-side with the original K9 helmet that K9 Helm makes, and kind of be like, okay, so what's the quality differences here? Because the K9 helmet is 3D printed, and the Dark Systems, as far as I can tell, is like injection molded. And so it's like, how do they hold up? and the lens structure is different and stuff like that. So we're going to do a side-by-side, and I do live streams on Thursdays at 5 p.m. So one of those we'll go out on the field and start putting them on the dogs and seeing how they work and taking them over obstacles, see how their field of vision is and everything, and working them with the radio communications and see how they react to the hearing. Because your voice sounds different on a radio than it does in person. So you have to get the dog used to that sound that you're making. And they recognize, oh, this is my person through this instead of just them in normal talk.
Is there night vision for dogs, or do dogs not need night vision?
That as far as I know, they don't have any kind of night vision for dogs, but we used to move and we would do search and rescue and tracking with dogs in pitch black, where you're literally either running MVGs or you're moving very slowly and just kind of feeling your way through. Dogs will run through the woods at night and never run into a tree. And our belief, it's hard to kind of 100% understand why they can do certain things, but our belief is they have access to a world we don't, is how we describe it when we're tracking, right? So they detect so much in the world of scent that it's like a whole other world that we just simply don't have any access to. They can go, this person has cancer, and it's right there because they can sense it via scent. They can track somebody, that moved somewhere 3 days ago. We can pick up that scent and we can track them to where they are now. And so I believe that that's what they're doing when they're moving through the woods, is they can sense where the things that would cause them problems are just via the scent as they move through. So we do a lot of night work with dogs, and I've never had them need night vision, and they never run into anything.
It's like the amplified sixth sense. I mean, they know when somebody comes on your property, they know what that guy's intention is before we even know that guy's there most of the time.
Yep. And my philosophy on that is they can detect the adrenaline and cortisol and things like that.
Coming out of the pores,
Yeah.
Okay, here's one from Ontario Canine that I'm hoping you will understand the question. Can you please discuss the topic on dogs that will only function doing protection amongst other dogs? How do you translate that over to the dog doing it alone without other dogs around? So I think it's a separation between group protection versus single dog protection.
Yeah, and one of the things we do when we work protection dogs is if we have a young dog, we either will start a young dog doing protection work beside its mother, right? So maybe it's 12 weeks old, it's getting ready to do its very first introduction to protection work. We bring its mom out, we kind of tether her somewhere. We have a handler behind the young pup, and the handler's encouraging the pup. I'll come in, I'll let the mother hit me, and with the equipment on, and then I'll while she's thrashing and ripping at that arm, I come over and I agitate the puppy. And you'll see the pups kind of they look at their mom and they look at me, and they look at their mom and they look at me and they go, okay, and they jump up and bite it, and then they'll kind of work from there. And so you can use dogs to bring the other dogs into the work. Then if you're trying to separate those dogs back out, generally what you want to do is you slowly create distance from one another. So when we do our deployments, for example, the dogs might be biting with their handler, so they're on a lead connected to their handler for maybe 4 to 6 months, depending on the dog, right? And then when they do their first deployment, well, that dog's been connected and knows where their handler is because they can feel the tension on the lead and they know their handler's the one holding it. As soon as that tension goes away, they're like, where's my handler? Where'd they go? And the farther from their handler they get, the more stressed they are being out there all on their own. And so they got to build that confidence. So whether you're separating them from other dogs or whether you're separating them from their handler, you do it slowly. So like a first deployment would be 6 to 8 feet away, right? And you tell your dog to watch like they would normally do, but then instead of holding on to them, you let them go. They run the 2 or 3 feet, from where the end of the lead would be. They bite the guy. And at first they might be like, whoa, I'm kind of like, I don't know where my handler is. And we work them a little bit. And then if they disengage too much, then I go grab the lead and work them on the lead again. Then once their confidence is back up, I go drop the lead again. And we go back and forth till the dog learns, oh, I can do this on my own. And then as the dog's doing it on their own, then I go, okay, now stand over there and deploy the dog. And now stand farther away and deploy the dog, until eventually we're sending dogs where we can't even see the bad guy. And we're like, go hunt, go find the bad guy and fight with him. And so that's a build-up process. So you do the same thing, whether it's a handler and a dog, the handler giving the dog confidence, or whether it's other dogs giving the dog confidence. One thing I would try is do different dogs. So, our dogs, they have to get to a certain point before we're deploying dogs off lead together, right? And we do a lot of multiple dog deployments, but the first time you do 2 dogs together, it's always a risk. And a lot of times the younger of those 2 will start targeting the other dog, because fighting another dog is a lot less stressful than fighting a human being. And when a human being is a pinnacle predator, we're among the pinnacle predators. Human beings can take a stick and sharpen it and go kill bears. So not everybody can do that, but that's among the human capabilities. So when a dog is going, I have to fight that. And we never do our bite work as games. Our bite work is never games where we're like, oh, let's play this game. When I have a puppy, a 12-week-old puppy, and I'm getting ready to start that puppy, the puppy's on a flat collar. So if it lunges and everything, it's not getting a correction. And the handler's going, watch him, right? And I'm coming in, and that puppy's like, something's different here, because my whole demeanor is, I'm going to hurt you. And the puppy has to defend itself. And so if it barks, I go, oh, and then it's like, ooh, he's scared of me when I bark. And if he'll come out and just bark his first couple of sessions, I give it to him, right? Good job. You showed aggression. But what I want him to do, and I do until I can't take their bites anymore, they go straight on my arms. So I've got scars all over my arms, and I've always got little scratches and things. I'm always trying to, like, I got my bites this weekend there. The dog went up the sleeve. And I'm always like, good job, dog. That freaking sucked. And my hand's numb for the rest of the day. But that's what they're supposed to do, right? So they bite right on my arms. And anytime they show that aggression, they move forward, they get praised by either the fight ends or I back off, right? One of the two. So, if a young dog lunges out early on and puts his teeth on me and bites down, I go, ah, and then it's like, okay, I think I did it. And I kind of will crawl away, or if I'm on my feet, I, kind of limp away like, oh, it hurts. And I kind of go out of sight, and they're like, yeah, you did it. Good job. And the dog's like, oh, okay, I did it. Now, next time I'm going to require more of that dog. But each time is, if we get progress, then we go end on that progress. Let that dog go back to its safe place and think on that and go, yeah, that was a little harder than last time, but I did it. And so that's how I build those dogs apart from each other too, is it's a little bit at a time, building that confidence. If they take a step back, move them closer together again. Start from there and then build back out again. So that's how we kind of keep moving that. You're always reading the dogs, engaging the dogs, and adjusting your training based on the dogs.
Okay. What is your preferred breed for a protection canine?
So we breed and train Dutch Shepherds, German Shepherds, and Belgian Malinois. And the company that I started training with taught me the breeding practices that they were taught, which is there's a specific way we cross all three of those lines together. And so it kind of brings out all the best traits of all three qualities in those dogs. And those are the only dogs that we train and sell. Now, we have public training classes where people can bring any kind of dog. I've done bite works with Black Russian Terriers, Airedales, some with pits. You have to be careful training pits to fight humans because they're a mauler breed, so they tend to target things. And once they get something in their mind that this is what I'm supposed to target, you have to be careful with that. So if they're not a good handler, I don't work with those lines. But you can do most any dog. The reason I like those dogs is because they're so capable at so many things. There are better tracking dogs than those dogs, but the tracking dogs aren't good protection dogs. There might be better protection dogs than those dogs, but they can't do any of the other things that they can do. And so to me, those three breeds encompass the best qualities all around of dogs that can track, dogs that have solid nerves, dogs that can handle gunfire, and dogs that can handle the stress of fighting a human being to the death potentially. And for the dog, we have to acknowledge that for the dog, that is a highly stressful thing we're asking them to do. And so we have to train them to do that. We don't just hand an 18-year-old a gun and go, good luck, go to war, right? When Russia did that, the only way they got those kids to go in there is go, and if you turn around, we're going to mow you down over here. So the only way you're potentially not going to die is keep going that way. Mm-hmm. And so if you want to teach somebody to fight, you've got to inoculate them to the level of stress they're going to be in. And that's a process.
That makes sense. I mean, bigger picture, why would a person want to build a protection dog into their life, do you think? Like, what are some scenarios that might come up?
I always kind of look at it this way. When police officers go out on the street, where they have a pretty high probability that they're going to interact with people in a negative way, right? They don't just have a gun. They have their gun, and they have their taser, and they have their pepper spray, and their aspeton, and their handcuffs, and they have all of, I call it the bat belt, right? They have their bat belt on so that they can incrementally increase the situation to meet the demand of that moment and then deal with the situation. Most people that are security minded, that are protection minded, they have their concealed weapon permit. They carry their gun with them where they go. But you're still in that situation where you can verbally talk to somebody. You could engage with your fists if you want to, but you've got a gun right there. So that's an armed conflict. And if they realize it's there, then they can reach it now. Or you can just draw your gun and escalate right to deadly force, right? Incorporating a dog into that allows you to have kind of that same progression of escalation of force that a police officer has with his bat belt. So with my dog, number one, just having a dog that's obviously well-trained, people are going to go, I don't know if I want to mess with that person, right? If you have a dog in your home that people know, hey, there's dogs there. Like here, we have 40 dogs on ground. Everybody knows, don't go there. Right? All the signs on our gates are like, no trespassing. We're tired of burying the bodies. Just kidding. We need more dog food. Please come in. And, stuff like that all over the front gate. So like our new clients that come to train with us are often, like women with their dogs and stuff. And they're like, I was scared to come through the gate. And it's like, yeah, that's just there for the people who aren't supposed to be here. But I lost my train of thought. I hate it when that happens.
I was just asking big picture. Why would you want a protection dog? Yeah.
So when you're dealing with your escalation of force, you go, okay, so now I have the dog. That's a show of force of some sort, right? But if you have a dog that's not trained to protect, it's like carrying an unloaded gun. You can pull it out and point it at somebody, but if you can't pull the trigger and make pew-pews come out, then it's probably not going to be of much value to you. So you have the dog as a show of force. Then if somebody engages with you in a way that you're like, I'm not feeling comfortable here at all, you can turn around, engage with them, stop following me, right? Somebody's following you in a parking lot, something like that. And if they continue to try and close distance on you, you have the dog and you're like, stay back or you'll be bit. And you put your dog on what we call watch, which some dogs bark when they're on watch. Some dogs just get that look like you step within my ring and I'm going to rip your arms off. And they will when they're on watch, right? They're just like, just waiting. Just please come a little closer. If I can reach you, I'm going to rip your arms off. And then if the person decides to present a weapon at that point, they draw a knife, they draw a gun, all they have to do is let go of that lead and the dog goes. And they go in and they engage with the person. So I've got all these levels of force that I can use in between, and only either them approaching within that 6 foot radius, if your lead's 6 feet long, or them actually drawing a weapon are ones that result in injury, right? Everything else is show of force, but going, you see what's here, it's barking at you or it's looking at you like it's about to bite you. If you are still dumb enough to come into this ring, then I can justify my use of force. And then if I need to go to a firearm to fight with my dog, I can. But think about this too. So you're a young person, mom or dad, doesn't matter. You're out by yourself with your kids and it's nighttime and you're coming out of Disney World. Right? Whatever. You're someplace where you were with your kids. It's nighttime and your car's way over there and you're walking with your kids and 2 or 3 guys come up and they want your money. Even if you carry concealed, are you going to fight with your 2 or 3 kids there? Like, how are you going to deal with that situation? A lot of people are like, oh yeah, I do whatever. Well, you're an idiot because if you try to fight with your kids there, you're putting them at risk that they simply don't need to be at, right? I grab my wallet. Boom, there you go. Take it. Now, if they still want to fight me after I give my wallet, then I'll fight. But it's not because I wanted to fight. If I have a dog in that situation, one of the things our more advanced dogs are trained to do is we call it manning drills. So we have reversing drills, which is you're biting this arm and I draw a gun or a knife with this hand and I go to use it on you. They release this arm and they retarget. So that's one of the big things that kind of separate us from a lot of the places out there that are doing training. But we also do multiple attacker drills. So we'll do these in different ways. We'll do it where there's 2 people right off the bat and the dog has to go back and forth between them. We'll do it where there's an initial threat and the dog engages the initial threat. And then another guy comes around and attacks the handler from a different direction. And the handler's like, hey, come help. And they're fighting. And then the dog has to realize, oh, crap, sometimes these guys come from more locations than just the one that I'm focused on. And they have to realize, come back, help your handler. And then that person, when the dog engages, will separate. The other person will come attack the handler again, and they're moving on different people, right? So when the dogs have gone through these drills, they see multiple threats, and they're like, smash that guy first. And then if this guy goes near my kids, I'm going to release and come over and smash that guy. I'm going to smash this guy over here. And then you can now fight alongside your dog. Or you're a mom with your kids at the grocery store, and some weird creepy dude wants to put you in his car, and you deploy your dog on him using the same methods that we talked about before, stay back. And you go, all I want to do is get my kids to safety. So you grab your kids, you run to your car, you throw everybody in the car, you back out, you roll your window down and go, let's go. And the dog lets go and runs back to you, jumps in the car, and you drive away. And call the cops and deal with the situation however you want at that point. So those are various different scenarios that we, number one, we train our dogs. We say the three most likely scenarios you'll end up using your dog in is an attack on handler, which is some form of like a surprise attack, an attack at or in your vehicle. So you might be at a stoplight and you get like an ambush of some sorts while you're in your vehicle, or you're at your vehicle loading and somebody tries to use the distraction of that moment to come and approach, and then a home invasion. Those are your three most likely situations where you would need a dog. So those are the situations we primarily train our dogs in.
That makes sense.
Do your customers with dogs like this typically have them with them day to day? Like, is that a real thing, going to Disney World with a bite dog like that?
So our dogs are fully safe to do that with. Whether you're able to do it legally depends on a couple of things. So the service dog laws in America are very obscure. Now, I don't ever encourage anyone to not follow the laws, but when you look at them, if you just look down the list of possible disabilities that you may have, 90% of people would read that list and go, yeah, that one applies to me. And so you go to talk to your doctor and say, hey, I'd like a dog to help me deal with this situation. And the doctor goes, yep, you could use a dog for that situation. They write you a letter stating that you could use a service dog for that. Now you're legally covered for a service dog. Now, of course, it's always your responsibility whether your dog is classified as a service dog or not. And there's no registration for service dogs. There are people who do it. Oh, your dog is registered. It has zero legal meaning at all. The federal law doesn't require that. There's nothing like that is a thing. What it is, do you have a disability? So you have a doctor wrote you a letter stating that you have a disability that you would benefit from the use of a service dog with. And then, is your dog safe? Are you responsible for it? So in general, the dog should never do anything in public that a person shouldn't be allowed to do in public. So if you're walking through a store, it's not cool for people to pull down their pants and poop on the floor. Dogs shouldn't poop on the floor in the store, right? If it's not cool for people to start yelling at people in a store, they shouldn't be barking at people in a store. Obviously, we can't just walk up and punch people in a store. Dogs shouldn't be putting their teeth on anything. So our dogs are exposed to all that, and they move in public, and they do that because I'm 30% disabled veteran, so I get whatever dog I have with me is my service dog that day. And I take them all over the place. I fly in airplanes with them. I go through airports. We do all that kind of stuff. So is it possible? Yes. Would it apply to every single person? That depends on your particular situation medically and what you're comfortable doing.
So why don't bad guys just shoot the dog immediately? Why not? If we're going to grab a kid, we're going to grab a woman, throw her in a van, why don't immediately kill the dog? Is that not happening? Because I don't hear about it. Or is
so it's a possibility.
The dog's in difficult target, so they're probably just not targeting people with dogs.
So I hear people say things like, "Oh, well, I would just shoot that dog if somebody deployed it on me," and I'm like, "Well, it doesn't sound like you've been in very many gunfights." Because if you look at the statistics of people who are supposedly trained, the police officers, right? Now, they don't get a tremendous amount of training, but probably neither do most criminals. And you look at the number of rounds that they actually land on target in gunfights, it's like 1 in 10, 1 in 5 for the really good shooters, right? And that's on a human-sized target moving at human speeds. Now you make that target 1/4 the size and make it move twice as fast. That's a hard target to hit. And even if you can hit it, then my dog was the perfect distraction, because by the time you realize, oh, yay, that threat's over, now I'm shooting you because now you've shown true lethal force, and vice versa, right? So you can use dogs in a lot of different ways, and the military likes them because they are below line of sight. So when you kick in a door and you're doing a room entry, right, and this would apply to the average person if you're clearing your house because you heard a noise, right? When people feel that there's a potential threat, their stress goes up and they start having certain physiological responses. And one of those very common ones is tunnel vision. Yep. Mm-hmm. And if you don't know how to deal with tunnel vision by looking around, and after people get inoculated that stress, it doesn't affect them that much anymore. But they get auditory exclusion, they get tunnel vision, they get fast motion or slow motion time. I've always had slow motion time, which the first time happened freaked me out. And then after that, I was like, wait, this is awesome. Like, I can move faster than everybody else here. Because you're able to process that information. And it's like, oh, look what's going on over there. So when the stress level goes up, a lot of times, if they don't already know the dog is there, they don't ever realize the dog is there. So if somebody is, I'm going to kidnap this person, right? Unless they're a really experienced kidnapper, they're probably really nervous about it. And so they're experiencing a lot of those physiological stress reactions, including tunnel vision, and they may not even see that the dog is there, right? If they're hiding in the woods and they're waiting to, jump out and grab the next girl who's, out jogging this morning on this nature trail and to pull her into the woods, they're not going to realize she has a dog with her until it's too late, right? So dogs are a great deterrent. There are people though, and I've been talking to a lot with a guy that grew up in a really bad neighborhood, and a lot of people in that neighborhood had dogs. And a lot of the guys that were doing the robberies and things like that in the houses learned early on, these dogs only bite one spot and they hold on. So they would wrap their arms in sweatshirts and things like that so that they could take the hit from the dog and then stab it and kill it. And so because of that, we want our dogs to be able to counter all these things. And so somebody produces a gun, our dog sees something in their hands, because dogs aren't like humans. They don't have our full ability to reason and go, oh, I know exactly what that thing is. But they're trained. If there's something in somebody's hand, it's a threat. Bite that arm first, because you're going to disable their ability to use that arm. And probably they're presenting it in their strong arm, which means the only one they have left that's functional is the one that they're not as coordinated with typically. So your dog can get shot. If you're in a fight, I always say, if you're in a fist fight, expect to be punched. If you're in a knife fight, expect to be cut. And if you're in a gunfight, expect to get shot. And you need to prepare yourself mentally for all three of those things that happen, and you win anyway. And if you're not mentally prepared for that, then you're not prepared for dealing with that type of situation. And that doesn't mean you have to go out and fight all the time. It just means you need to run those mental scenarios. What would I do if? What would I do if? What would I do if? Right. And have realistic expectations of what that's going to be like. Not I'm going to draw my gun and kill everybody and end of story, because that's not how it works in real life.
Right. Okay. So what gear is most distracting to a dog, by which I think they mean gear that I might have on that I should train with around the dog so they become immune to being distracted by it?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that people will do to try and create distractions for dogs. And some of them are great initial things. So they'll take like milk cartons and put things that rattle in them and make noises. They'll get like streamers, like almost like cheerleader type streamer things, and shake those around the dogs. To try and get them used to that kind of stuff for stress. When I move with my dogs, the things that are most distracting for them is when it's cold, especially when it hasn't been for a while and it gets cold. You have like a cold snap and everybody puts on jackets. That kind of looks to the dog like everybody's wearing bite suits around me. And so they will kind of be like, are we doing something? Like, is something going on? Like everybody's dressed up for training. Like, is this going to be I'm biting 200 people today situation? And, but because we take our dogs out in public a lot, and they will see sketchy people in public, like your dog, we call it alerting. They will alert on sketchy people. They'll be walking through the store, and then all of a sudden they'll be like, and I'll see them. I'm always kind of paying attention to them out of the corner of my eye, and I'll look to where they're looking, and I'll go, yeah, we might have to kill that guy later, but we're going to leave him alone for now. And then we move on about our day. And so they know when I tell you it's okay, when I tell you leave it, you are to leave it. And that's leave it is probably one of the most important commands to train any dog for the situations you've been experiencing, Nicole.
Yeah.
Leave it is extremely important, right? Leave that, cut it out, leave it alone. You have a protection trained dog that targets a person, and that person may be sketchy, right? They may be a shady person, but you can't just shoot people who are sketchy and shady, right? That guy could be a, 5-time convicted felon of, violent crimes, but you can't just see him in the street and start shooting at him. So the dogs can't just see him and start biting him. And so we teach all of our dogs leave it, and we teach our dogs to, once they get exposed to a large enough group of people, which they just get that by going out in public and moving in public, they go, okay, yeah, I kind of see what's going on, right? That doesn't mean that they never get startled, because you get startled. There's a lot of tier 1 operators that I've worked with in the past that you can startle them. That doesn't mean they're pussies and scared. It just means people get startled, and so do dogs sometimes. Mm-hmm. So, having a startled reaction is one thing, but seeing something and then going, I think I'm going to bite that even though I'm not supposed to, that's an unacceptable behavior. Just like my kind of philosophy on the team dogs and stuff like that is, there is a way to stabilize those dogs so they don't bite handlers and other team members and things like that, so you don't have to muzzle them all the time. And to me, I look at it and I go, would it be acceptable to have a team member on the team that just occasionally randomly punches other team members or draws his pistol and shoots them in the leg? It's like, that's not acceptable. So why is it acceptable for the dog to do that on these teams? And they just go, well, we want our dog super hard, so we just deal with it. And I'm like, I mean, that's an option. but there are other options out there. And so that's why we focus so heavily on that, because obviously we're not in that environment, and we want to move with our dogs in public. And in 18 years of doing this, I've never had, knock on wood, a client call me up and say, my dog bit somebody that it wasn't supposed to bite. And so that's, something that we give a lot of focus to.
Mm-hmm.
So why do you think that's not part of the soft regimen in their dogs?
I think they have so many other things they're trying to do in such a short period of time, because they want those dogs around 18 months to 2.5 years old, so they get the maximum working life out of them.
So training tempo.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. Like, I understand why they do what they do. So some of the stuff that they do because you're a dog handler, right, on a SEAL team, and you go on a mission and your dog gets injured on that mission or killed. You have to be able to come back to base, grab another dog, and go on the next mission. So there's certain things that they have. There's certain requirements that they can't have one dog committed to one handler and that's it, because then the dogs die. I mean,
right.
SEAL guys die all the time. Like, people don't hear about it a lot unless you have friends that are SEALs. But, it's not uncommon in a week for 18 SEALs to die. And stuff like that happens depending on how active they are and things like that. So their dogs are dying out there too, or they're getting injured. They get too close to a blast and they get a TBI. And even if they're going to come back to work in 6 months, they're out of commission right now. So we got to go grab another dog and go. So they have limitations that they're dealing with that, like, a police officer may not, or a family may not be dealing with. Because our dogs primarily are working for the bond. Now, there's a way to train a dog to bond to something other than the actual person itself. They can bond to a uniform. They can bond to different things like that. And then you have much less of those issues. One of the things that drives me crazy is to see pictures of police doing bite work with their dogs. And guess what the guy with the sleeve is wearing? A fucking police uniform.
Yeah.
And then in the military, they got military guys doing the same thing. And of course, they're doing the bite and hold thing, right? So they only have the sleeve on, and they're wearing the military uniform. And then the police officers are like, well, I just don't get why these dogs keep biting fellow officers. It's like, because you're fucking training them to bite fellow officers. If you want a dog, and the soft community's figured this out. All of their guys, when they do bite work, wear whatever the place they're most likely to go next is wearing. So they wear the man dresses when we were so active over in the Middle East. And because that's what everybody wears over there, so they're dressed like the people in that area are going to be dressed like, which is different than what we're dressed like. So see people dressed like this, we're the good guys. See people dressed like that, those are the people you go bite. And, and that's, some people may not like it to think of it that way, but you have to condition a dog at like a 3-year-old level, right? Yeah. 3-year-old human level. They have to understand things in a very simple format. If somebody's wearing this, you bite them. Well, that's what you're doing when you're letting a dog bite somebody in a uniform all the time. Unless that uniform is the uniform of the enemy, right? And then that would probably work. So when you get into these issues of targeting and all of that kind of stuff, it's a thing where you've got to work within the bounds that you have, kind of like in the permaculture thing. You have your restrictions, and you got to work within those restrictions. So I think what happens is they're trying to get the dogs to do, helo casting and rappelling and free fall jumping and all of these things that they're trying to get the dogs to do so they can go on any mission that the team is going on. And it's a lot of work to do the stability. Mm-hmm. And so I incorporate it into everything we're doing. But if you're not willing, and most trainers are not willing to get bit by dogs. And I don't like getting bit by dogs, but if I'm going to get bit by one, I want it to be a young dog. And so I want to put them under that stress and in that situation when they're young, so that when I get bit, it's not a big deal. And then we deal with it as they get older. But a lot of training methods, their version of stability actually makes their bite work not as good. And the way that we've done it, it doesn't have any impact on it at all. And so it's just a way that they're trained. And the predominant philosophy in dog training is bite work starts off as a game. So it starts off as like a tug kind of a situation. And then they slowly transition that into more stress. When we do our bite work, the very first time a dog's exposed to it, it's you hurt me or I'm going to hurt you. And so they look at that very differently than they look at everything else. Everything else is, I'm not going to kill it. But when there's a threat, then I go after it. And so we could jump out of an airplane. It's stressful. The dog's like, whoa, this is like we're falling. I've never done this before. But their immediate reaction isn't to bite me, because there's only one time you bite. And that's when there's a threat for us to deal with. And I think that, and again, this is kind of me from the outside looking in. But that would be my best guess as to why they don't put more energy into that. And there's a simple solution: just throw a muzzle on the dog and go, and I don't have to deal with it.
Right.
It's just, to me, that creates a lot of liability that if I were the one with the dog, I wouldn't want to have to deal with.
So Jonathan Aldrich on here, I know Jonathan. He had somebody try to come into the house while he was gone. His wife and daughter were there this weekend. And he brought up dog again, and he's on here. And he says, what questions should I ask when selecting a potential program to purchase a dog from?
Well, my best recommendation is buy a dog from somebody who controls the breeding and the training. So most places out there that do protection dogs, what they do is they go to the sporting events like KNPV and Schutzen and places like that, and they watch those dogs. And a lot of those young dogs that are in that, they're there to be sold. So these guys will get what they call green dogs, which are young dogs. They'll train them to do the Schutzen or the KNPV, and then they'll go and they'll show them, and then they want people to come and say, I want to buy your dog. And then they sell that dog to that person. Then that person, the trainer, takes it back, finishes it off, and then sells it to somebody, right? Or you have people that buy puppies, and then they'll buy like 20 puppies, and 8 to 10 or 12 of them will wash out of their program because they're getting them from all sorts of people, and most of the people breeding have no idea what they're really doing. And so you get the washout factor, which, people are always like, oh, well, I got this protection dog, but it washed out of this program. Like, why do you think it washed out of the program? It's probably not going to protect you if it needs to, right? And then you have guys that do it like we do, which is we have a breeding program, and then we hand select from each litter the dogs that are going into the protection program, and then the best dogs that from each litter are the ones that are going to clients and that are being at their home. So at that point, the selection process is, what do you want, what do you like, and what's your lifestyle like? Are you more sedentary and you stay in a house all the time? Then we're going to pick you out a more mellow dog that's not as hard to handle, right? Are you out hiking all the time and doing very active things? Then we'll give you a more energetic dog. And so that's kind of your criteria. Most people that are breeding and selling dogs don't make much money. It's like you got people that are great dog trainers and are terrible businessmen. And I'm not a great businessman, but I've learned over the years I'm running a business, not a dog training club. Right. And so
you don't hate money, right?
Exactly. So I've learned to make it profitable. And, we turn gross somewhere in the $250,000 a year range, and it's a lifestyle business. So that's not doing too bad. Right. So I will turn people away. And most dog people that are selling dogs are so desperate to sell something and make that next buck that they'll tell you whatever they think you want to hear. And that gets really dangerous. And so it's just one of those things where you can ask the right questions, but if the person's not going to tell you the truth, having the right questions to ask doesn't help. Being able to go and meet the dogs and interact with them is really helpful as well. Depending on how far away, that may be a little bit problematic. I mean, I sell dogs all over the country. Some of my clients are able and willing to fly in and meet me anyway. And others, we just, talk and we get it all set up, and then they either come for the delivery or they pay me to go out and deliver to them. But when what you want is you want somebody who understands their dogs enough to go, do you have children? How old are your children? What pets do you have? Describe your lifestyle to me. Do you want your dog to sleep on the bed or in a crate or beside your bed? And you ask these questions about how their life works, and then you cater the dog and the training to that lifestyle, and you help select a dog based on that lifestyle.
All right. How do your dogs react to aggressive animals, other dogs, coyotes, bears, etc.?
So I've had several clients run into issues like these that go hiking a lot, and so they'll have either a coyote or a wolf come up. We had a bear and a mountain lion scenario, but those were kind of at a distance. And in all of those situations, my recommendation is this: leave it. The dog should leave it. Because if the dog begins acting aggressively, first of all, a dog isn't really a match for anything above coyote. Okay, so wolf, if you've never seen a wolf in real life, they are gigantic. And they are used to killing other animals. And if your dog hasn't been fighting other dogs a lot, then it's probably at a disadvantage. Cats, pound for pound, are way more deadly than dogs are, right? Have you ever gotten in a fight with a 15-pound house cat? Like, if it's fighting, you're tore up. and bears and things like that. Like your dogs can distract these things, but they're probably going to die in the process if that's what they're used for. So my recommendation is leave it. And when I've encountered things like this in the past, I used to take my dogs hunting with me a lot. And so, when the deer and other things would come up, it'd be, leave it, I see it. And their job is just to lay there and not do anything. And then I deal with the situation. So if I have a firearm, I might choose to deal with the situation with the firearm. If I have bear spray, I might choose to deal with the situation with bear spray. I might try to just slowly back away from the situation. It all depends on what's going on in that moment. But normally, if your dog begins acting aggressively in that situation, the best you can hope for at that point is a distraction. Just let them go, and maybe you'll see them, maybe you won't. For me, I put a lot of time, energy, and effort into my dogs, and they're important to me. So the best thing they can do is don't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Leave alone, come with me, or I'm going to do this thing, whatever it is. And then if your dog is trained and they understand what that means, then they're not in your way, right? So the worst thing that can happen is your dog starts barking, a bear gets agitated, you're trying to hold on to the dog with one hand and find your bear spray in your purse with the other hand, and now the bear comes up, kills your dog and you because you couldn't do anything. So, having control of your dog at all times is critical from my perspective. I go, you should have control of your dog, and even in the worst protection scenario. If your dog is biting somebody and they're defending you and they're protecting you, and you say, out, let's go, let's go, let's go. They should out and let's go, because maybe we're running away now. Or maybe I got to the car and I'm trying to get you in the car so we can leave this situation. It depends on what's going on. Or maybe there's another guy attacking me and I need you to leave that guy alone and get over here and help me out. So there's lots of reasons why you need to have that control in all of those scenarios and situations. And then you as the human are the one making the decisions. The dog is listening to your decisions and reacting accordingly. And it's not that you don't train them to deal with, do certain things in certain situations, but keep in mind their ability to process information is kind of like a 3 or 4-year-old.
Right.
So I want a 3 or 4-year-old that's carrying a gun around, which is what a protection dog is, to do everything I tell him, exactly how I tell him, exactly when I tell him, and to be, very disciplined.
And so anybody who's raised children knows that that's hard to teach.
Well, you have to remove the emotion from it, right?
Yeah.
So the clients that I have that struggle the most, that come to me with their dogs, right? They come and they have their dog, and it's like a 6-month-old male German Shepherd, and they're like, he's biting us and he's jumping on us and he won't listen and he's yanking me all over the place. And I take that dog's lead and I go pow one time on the lead, and I go hup on this table, and if it doesn't jump, I put it on the table and I go plutz and leave it. And that dog will, within 2 sessions, will respect me, and then I got to go, now they need to respect you, right? And the only way that happens is remove the emotion. Don't feel sorry for your dog. If your dog does something it's not supposed to, it needs a correction. If your child does something they're not supposed to, they need a correction. And, I try and explain it a little bit more to my kids because they can understand more, but don't do this because of that. But you're only going to be told this one time. I've now told you, if it happens again, there's going to be a consequence. And depending on how dangerous that consequence is for you or the dogs or whatever we're doing, it might be really, really painful for you. And I remove the emotion from it so that the lesson is there. And people that do have to deal with aggression issues, we were talking about this a little bit earlier with your dogs, is the hardest thing about dealing with an aggressive dog when you're trying to correct it is once you've corrected it, number one, you've physically exerted yourself really highly probably. So you got an adrenaline spike that's going to drop off after the fight. And maybe you got bit and hurt a little bit in the process. And what you have to do when the fight is over is go, good Plutz, good leave it. That's all you had to do, buddy. Right? Mm-hmm. Not be like, oh, I'm pissed off at you because you hurt me, blah, 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 which that's most people's reaction, right? So removing the emotion from the situation really, really helps.
Yeah, training dogs feels very schizophrenic because you're like, I'm the most angry, happy person.
And I describe it as it does look that way, but it's control, right? You must control yourself. I will give you the hardest correction you need, especially aggression issues, right? For obedience, it's the lightest correction needed. But on aggression issues, we ramp that correction way up. And I often will tell my clients, correct your dog until you feel good about it. Mm-hmm. Because if you don't feel like they got the correction they needed, then you're going to stay angry with them.
Right.
If you feel like you corrected them hard enough, maybe you didn't correct them hard enough, but at least I can let it go now. Mm-hmm. Right. And then you can go, okay, you got what I think you deserve for that. Now I can relax and we can switch gears again. And I can tell you you're doing a good job for what you're doing.
Okay, we're going to go two-part with this next one from Bobby. Do the dogs forget their training over time, and how much ongoing training as a dog, a protection dog owner, do I need to build into my life when I get one?
So in terms of forgetting their training over time, not really. What happens is, and this happens to people too, right? Discipline is a perishable skill. And if you've had it at one point in your life, you can probably get it back quicker. But if you get lazy, it's hard to get disciplined again, right? If you're in a good workout schedule and then you gain 30 pounds, getting back into a workout schedule again is hard. That's how it works for the dogs. The dogs will probably come to you, whether you get them from me or somebody else, they probably come pretty disciplined and obedient. But if you don't maintain that discipline, then you lose it. Now, I always tell my clients this, because I deal with this all the time when I'm doing a delivery. I say, you probably don't want your dog as disciplined as it is right now, because your lifestyle probably doesn't require it. And it probably takes a little bit more effort than you want to put into it. But you probably need to bring your discipline level up a little bit while the dog's discipline level comes down, and you'll find that happy medium. But do it slowly, so start off strict and ease off slowly until you're happy with the effort that it requires from you and the behavior that you're getting from the dog. Because if you let the discipline slip too much, you will put the work in to fix it, or you will pay me to put the work in to fix it. But either way, it's going to require work. And if you maintain it, it's a lot easier. So how do you maintain discipline in your dog? You just have discipline all the time. And it's like, how do you be a disciplined person? You're just disciplined all the time. You can't be a disciplined person half the time, right? Mm-hmm. If you're disciplined half the time, you're undisciplined half the time. And which one's going to suffer? The discipline is going to suffer because you're going to drift to being less disciplined, right? So being disciplined all the time is when my dogs are in the house, they're in a place. They don't roam the house. When I play with my dogs, if I want to throw a ball or whatever, I do that in obedience. So I might throw the ball 5 or 6 times, let them just run and get it. And then I grab they have to bring me the ball back, first of all, so they can't just be crazy. We're doing a thing, right? Even though it's something they enjoy. And then I get the ball and I go, leave it. And I throw the ball. Now they better leave it, because what if you throw that ball on the road by accident and there's a car coming? If I say leave it, you have to leave it, right? So we use these times when we're even playing with the dog to build the obedience and to maintain the discipline. So when I'm walking on a trail with my dog, it's walking at my side. It's not pulling me down the path. When I take my dog for a walk, I don't take my dog for a walk and use the bathroom at the same time. I take them in the back into the spot where they go to the bathroom, and I say, get busy. They get busy, and then we go for a walk. And while we're walking, they're at my side. If they see another dog, I go, leave it alone. I see it. They're not to bark and lunge or go meet that dog. If a person walks up, they don't jump on them and put their paws on them and want to get petted. No, you're with me. You're in a foos. That's what we call it when they stay at our side. That's where you are, right? And if you just do it all the time, it becomes your way of life and it's easy. If you let your dog slack, you will, at some point, you'll realize, oh, crap, I went too far, and then you'll suffer. Now, when it comes to the protection side of things, it's similar to having fight training or firearms training or things like that. You can get really good at shooting, even, like some kind of combat shooting, right? And then if you don't do it for a long time, you're probably still better than most people, even just, going cold, but you probably aren't nearly as good as you were before, right? And what mostly suffers in that situation is the stress inoculation. So stress inoculation is another thing that's perishable. So if you're dealing with high stress all the time, like a tier 1 operator is, they can deal with enormous amounts of acute stress, and they don't get affected by it. To them, that's normal. Right? If they go live a very comfortable life for 2 or 3 years, and then they're thrown back into that situation, again, they're probably going to do better than an average person, but they're going to be all of a sudden like, oh, crap, I'm out of practice. Like, I'm getting tunnel vision again. Now, they'll probably be able to work through that tunnel vision, and they're not going, what the hell is this? Why can't I see anything? But they're still being affected by it, right? So the physiological responses start to come back because their stress inoculation has dropped to some lower level than it was at before. So your dog comes with a certain stress inoculation level, and if they're not fighting, meaning doing their training and working in that several times a year, they don't lose the ability to bite, because they're a dog and they keep that. But what they mostly lose and what mostly lacks off is their outing and their recall, because they're getting auditory exclusion, they're getting tunnel vision, they're getting all the same things that people get in fights, and they're not used to fighting anymore. And so you're calling them, and it's not that they're being disobedient, it's that they don't hear you. It's like, have you ever shot, even hunting, like if you're a hunter, you probably know this. When you see unless you hunt all the time and you're always successful, right? You see a deer or caribou or an elk, you're excited. And you pull that trigger, your ears don't ring. you didn't hear the blast. It's just like, boom, it's down or it's not down. And it's like, why didn't you hear that? Because in the excitement and the adrenaline spike, you got auditory exclusion. Your ears basically said, we're shutting down right now because we're not necessary. And then when it was over, they came back on. Well, the same thing happens in dogs. You know, not every person experiences every stress reaction. Not every dog experiences every stress reaction. But if that's one of them that they experience, and most dogs do, then when you're trying to call your dog away, that's where they're sloppy. That's, you know, you have to get their attention somehow. So you either get it by yelling louder or by throwing something at them, and they're like, "Whoa, something hit me! Oh, my person's calling me." Okay, that sort of thing. But that's where I see them struggle the most. But really, probably what's will keep them as sharp as they can be without requiring you to make it a lifestyle is about 6 months. Every 6 months. Yeah. Doing some training with the dog in bite work. And it needs to be bite work where the dog's actually getting stressed and pushed a little bit, where they're getting hit and hammered and kicked into things, and they're actually having to move, not just like, oh, I'm just going to bite a sleeve and then be done.
That's kind of how speaking another language works. If you become fluent in the language,
yeah,
and then you don't speak it for a while, and then you speak it again, at first you're like, I can't remember, you know, the word for magnifying glass, and then 2 minutes later it starts kind of coming back. It falls back into your head. Right. A weird thing about memory. Okay, Chuck asks, do your trained dogs interact and integrate well with pets already in the household?
Yes, and it's because they have to, right? So what I tell people that have other animals already is I say, you need enough obedience in your other animals to be fair to this dog that you're about to bring home, but that doesn't mean you need your other animals to be quote unquote trained, right? So if you have yippy dogs, for instance, you know, the little dogs that are cute, but to me don't serve a purpose other than an alarm system. You know, there's somebody here. If those are the types of dogs, like something like a Jack Russell and things like that, right, that are going to be all over your dog and biting him and trying to, like, you know, harass him and play with him all the time. Well, that's not fair to your dog to just let that happen, you know, for more than a couple seconds, right? Like sometimes I'll let a puppy jump all over a big dog just so that the big dog learns you're not allowed to do anything to this puppy. But after the puppy, you know, bites their ear and hangs on their jowl for a second, then I go, okay, puppy, leave it alone. And then the puppy starts learning, leave it right then. Now you're going to be next to this big dog, but you're not allowed to do this to him because that's not fair to him. And if I let it keep going, it's perfectly reasonable for that dog to go, "Rawr!" Like, leave me the freak alone. Right. And if the dog does that, that's not the dog's fault. That's your fault for allowing the other dog to create that problem. But when our dogs come, again, leave it. Right. Our dogs are in our training classes. If you see any of our live streams of our training classes and stuff, we'll have tables. They're like 8 feet long and 2 feet wide. And we'll have 10 dogs on this table. And they're all side by side, kind of crammed onto this table. And then we have a table on either end of that table. And the dogs start one at a time on this table, and they cross over all the dogs, and then they get to the other end. Well, guess what? Those dogs are packed in there so tight that the dogs that are crossing over are stepping on the dogs because there's nowhere to put their feet, right? And when they do find a spot to put their feet, they're probably stepping on the paws or legs of the other dogs because that's the only thing in between each dog. And so there's a little bit of, hey, that hurt. Hey, but it's kind of like roughhousing, right? Yeah. If you're not used to roughhousing hurts. If you're used to roughhousing, you're like, yeah, that was fun. And so when they start doing this after a while, that this is just normal behavior, you have to let these dogs do this and you can't react. And if I have 2 problem dogs, I'll often put them side by side. And I stand there with those clients and I go, try it. Test me, please, because I want to fix it. So whenever you have a problem with a dog, the only way to fix the problem is to create the problem. You have to create the problem that is the problem so that you can correct it. And there may be some training you have to do before that to get them ready for the fixing of the problem. But you can't get a dog good with children unless you have children around the dog. You can't get a dog good around, shopping carts unless you take them to shopping carts and move them around the shopping carts. So if you're always avoiding your problems, you don't fix them. And so when you get into this, you know, those are the kinds of things to look at. And when you're dealing with dogs being good with other people's dogs, you want dogs that are disciplined and obedient and then know what leave it means. And then essentially all you do is you put your dog in their place, you tell them leave it, and you either have well-mannered, well-natured other animals, or you contain and control those animals either through obedience or gates or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. John, how much longer can you go? Just checking with you on time.
We can go.
You're cool? Okay. There's just a lot of questions today. You guys have lots of questions. It's great. What are some insurance considerations for protection dogs? That's always the question.
Yeah, and I'm not a lawyer, right? So these are just kind of my own opinions on things and the things that I've learned over the years. Number one, typically your homeowner's insurance wants to know if you have dogs. So if you have dogs and don't let them know, that can go poorly for you down the road.
Yeah.
They generally want to know what breeds they are and stuff like that. And hiding that kind of stuff just means if you have a problem, they're going to go, we're not liable or responsible for this because you didn't tell us about it. So it's better to tell them and figure that out in the first place. Now, they do often say, have your dogs ever bit anyone? I go, if my dogs have only ever bitten bite equipment, then no, they haven't bitten a person, right? They bit bite equipment that had a person inside of it. Mm-hmm. And so I'm comfortable, especially with our dogs being as stable as they are, I'm comfortable with answering no to that question. No, they haven't bitten a person. But if you're concerned with what if I need to use my dog in a defensive situation and then the inevitable lawsuit following, right? Mm-hmm. Well, first, it's important to understand if you defend yourself, it's probably about an 80% chance you're going to have a lawsuit afterwards.
Right.
And that's whether you defend yourself with your fists, with a knife, with a gun, or with a dog. So it's probably a good idea if you're a self-defense oriented person to have some form of legal insurance for that. And the one that I have heard is the best, I'm still kind of doing a little bit of research on my own, is US Law Shield, because they will defend you for defending your, now when I say defend you, this is legally, right? On the legal side of things, for defending yourself with anything, including a dog. So it could be with your fist, it could be with a toaster, a frying pan, a gun, or a dog. And they have other options for things like school bullying. Like if your kid gets in a fight with another kid at school, they'll come legally defend you at like a school board meeting, things like that. But their primary focus is self-defense, legal defense. And
we have to have for kids.
Well, I know, right? Like he said, it's amazing we have to have insurance for our kids.
Yeah.
Like if you don't send your kids to school and you homeschool them, you don't have that problem. But you know, I get it. There's a lot of kids in school and there's a lot of bullying stuff and things like that. So, you know, each person has to make their own decisions and live with the consequences of those decisions.
Yep. Okay. Hey, where are you going to be June 11th and 12th? They want to know if you're where you're going to be and if you're bringing a decoy.
Yeah, I'm planning on coming to you guys' place.
Yeah.
So I sent you that email back. Yeah, if it's open, I'm expecting to be there. I had a dog delivery that week that I pushed back a couple days to give me time to travel. Yeah. I was looking back at my calendar there. And so, yeah, we're planning to come. I do need to work out, make sure I can bring our RV. It's a 30-foot pull behind so that we have a place to house the dogs and stuff like that. But as long as all that works out and we have space and all that, we'll come and we'll do a demo. And if people want to get in the suit, there will be a liability form to sign because you will get bruised at minimum, right? Like my suits are not big poofy. We don't use what they call training suits, which is like we call marshmallow suits. You can barely move in them, and there's so much material that even the dogs with really large mouths just get material in their hand, in their mouth, and they bite. I want my dog to know they're biting an arm, right? And I want them to feel the arm. And in order to do that, the suits have to be thinner and the sleeves have to be more fitting to you. And so, you know, whenever I have a new decoy, I'm always like, okay, you know, when you shake somebody's hand, if you're a limp fish, it hurts. If you shake firmly, it doesn't hurt, right? When a dog bites your arm, you flex your forearm as hard as you can. And when they bite, it hurts less. And especially because our dog bite hands a lot. And so I'm like, and when they bite your hands, there's two things. Number one, have it clenched tight so it hurts less. And then once they get it, kind of pull it into the sleeve, and then they'll just be left on the material. Now, some of the dogs are smart and they'll be like, I'm finding that hand again. But then I kind of go feed them an elbow, and then they kind of get up here on the meaty part of your arm and it hurts less. But when you're fighting with our dogs, you have to fight the dogs. And, you know, we are reasonable with them because they're fighting us wearing something that can cause them injury if we're not cautious of it. Like you don't yank your arm out of a dog's mouth when they have their teeth in material that they cannot tear, right? Yeah. Because when it's an arm, they sink their canines in, and then the flesh rips as you pull away on material made out of Kevlar and all the things that they make bite suits out of. There's like 3 threads that they bind together. They fray eventually in the areas that get bit all the time, but the threads will pop that they're sewn together with, but the material almost never tears. So there's a few considerations like that, but other than that, it's fight the dog, right? And we'll knee them and hit them and punch them and try. We get training knives. You can have a training knife in your hand if you want. Warning: if to have a training knife means your hand is at the very end of the sleeve, and the dogs they go bam, and there's decent chances that you get tagged right in the hand. So it happens all the time to me, and you just suck it up and drive on. But if people want to do some of that stuff, we could bring a couple dogs that we can do deployments on.
Yeah, so we hadn't finished the conversation really, but yes, we're working on getting Joel out for Self-Reliance Festival, June 11th and 12th, and I'm pretty sure we'll get that put together in time. And I'm bringing it up right now because ticket price goes up in a few days. So if y'all haven't gotten your Self-Reliance Festival ticket yet, just go to selfreliancefestival.com, grab it before April 1st because the price goes up at that time. Okay,
and
here's
we
one.
Have a couple of puppies just for that we'll probably be bringing with us if they haven't all sold by then.
Okay.
We had an unexpected litter, Malinois German Shepherd cross. She figured out how to escape her kennel right as she was coming into heat and ran out and got bred by a Malinois, which is breeding I was going to do next year anyway, but she accelerated the process.
Yeah.
And then we had a Malinois breeding that was supposed to be 6 puppies and it was 11. Mm-hmm. So we may sell all those beforehand, but if we don't, we'll also bring some puppies for people to play around with.
Puppies to play with or buy.
What's the price tag? Like what's that price tag look like from this to
so
that?
Our pups start at $2,500 and we call those basic puppies. They have their ENS training, the early neurological stimulation, which is playing with their feet, holding them upside down, right side up, and on their backs, and then putting them on a cold surface once every day for their first 8 weeks. And so they have that, and other than that, don't have any actual obedience training though. And 8 weeks is in Florida, which is where we're based out of, is the earliest you can sell a puppy. So at 8 weeks old, those go home. Then we have what we call advanced puppies. Those are $5,500, and we spend another 8 weeks, so another 2 months with those dogs, and we get all their basic obedience introduction done, and we do their crate training and house training introductions. So that way, a lot of the stuff that, when people take a brand new puppy home, one of the hardest things for them to do is do the house breaking. They're like, my dog's peeing in the crate, or it's doing this, or I put it in the crate and it whines and screams the whole time, that sort of stuff. So we get through all that introduction. And then our protection dogs start at $20,000, and they go up from there depending on the level that you want. And all of that information is on our website, fortresscanine.com. But most of our clients, even I've had clients that literally could write me a check for $1 million. Not that any of my dogs are that expensive. And even they use our payment plans. And so for our payment plans, it's a $5,000 deposit. And then depending on how much you can pay and what kind of time frame you want your dog in, we basically divide the payments up in a monthly basis from that point forward. And I've got one client who's like, I want a dog in 2 years. So her dog hasn't even been born yet. Right. And she's like, I'll sign the contract, do the deposit, and I want these small monthly payments. And in 2 years, I want my dog. So we can make it feasible for most people. And then, once you get your dog and it's reserved, they get highlighted on the Fortress Instagram page. And I'm trying to get as active on MeWe and Float as I am on Instagram and Facebook, but transitioning over isn't as easy as I would have liked it to be.
Yeah, you can't automate that, unfortunately.
I know. I'm working on it.
Easier. Yeah. Okay. Would you suggest using counter conditioning to fix fear-related issues in dogs?
Well, it depends on what the fear is. So a lot of times dogs will react to something like a trash can on the side of a road, right? And we often think about it from our perspective, and we go, it's just a trash can. And if the dog was raised in the country and then it moves to a suburb, right, and you take it for a walk and it walks down the road and you bring it home and you do this for a week, and then all of a sudden one day you walk out and there's all these things on the road that weren't there the last 5 times we went for walks, the dog is going to go, what the heck is this, right? And that's okay. We just have to show them, listen, this thing is okay. We're going to move around it. We're going to touch it a little bit, and we're not going to overstress the dog. And then we're just going to go, and next week when they all show up again, we'll do it again. And after a couple of rotations of that, the dogs are just like, oh, okay, I know what this is now. At least I know it's not going to hurt me, right? I know it's something that just sits there and doesn't do anything. If you're dealing with fear issues that are like other animals have attacked them in the past, like dog parks are one of the worst places to take your dogs. Yeah. Right. And I go, it's not because your dog isn't obedient necessarily. It's because you have no control over the other people or dogs that are there. And whenever you go places where you don't control, you set yourself up for failure potentially. I always go with my new clients. I'm like, 6 feet around you in every direction. You control that space. Do not allow anything to happen within that space when you have your dog that you're not in control of. And there's multiple ways to control that. You can control it by being verbally assertive. You can control it by leaving an area, but you don't let anything happen within that space that you don't control. So I don't like taking my dogs to places that they can't control, or I can't control their environment. And then they get bit by another dog, and they do one of two things. They either go, now I'm going to be the aggressor because ain't nobody, biting me first again. Right. That's what was my effect when I got my first fight. Mom's like, don't hit first in a fight. I got my first fight and got my ass kicked. And I was like, screw that. If there's going to be a fight, I'm hitting first. Right. And I wasn't the biggest kid, but people generally left me alone because if it started, I was like, I'm scrappy. Like, you're going to win, but you're going to get some bruises in the process. And most of the bigger guys were like, then we'll just leave that guy alone. So they either take that approach, or they take the approach of every dog's going to hurt me. I'm scared of everybody. Mm-hmm. Right. And even if they're barking and kind of looking aggressive, a lot of times that's still that fear of, I'm just trying to keep everybody at distance. If you have that issue, that's a little harder to fix, especially if you don't have people around you that are willing to bring their dogs around you to get that socialization and stabilization done. So we deal with that a little bit in our classes. I'm kind of over helping people fix really stupid problems because I generally get bit sometime in the process of that training. And I'm like, yeah, I'm in my mid 40s now. I don't heal it quite as fast. And I get bit every week, multiple times through the suit at least. So I don't need to get bit by your dog too. But basically the process and the pattern is you slowly bring them closer and closer into whatever the thing is they're having problems with. So close might be 10 or 20 feet in the beginning, but you push into those problems. You don't avoid those problems. Mm-hmm. And depending on your dog's foundation and how bad it is, it could be something that you make progress but never fully fix, or it could be something you fix really quick, just depending on a lot of other factors that are there.
What problem are you having, Great Wolf? Like what's the issue? His dog's name's Fiona. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Is there a difference between a female or a male? Any difference?
Yeah, there's pretty big differences. The biggest thing is males are much more scent driven than females. So even getting a male pretty disciplined, they're still gonna, even if they're not like overtly sniffing, they're still kind of like, as they're walking around, kind of taking those scents in, and they will be more distracted by scent. Females are typically more focused on their protection work. And I like to describe it like this. I say males, when they, get confident in their bite work, they fight to fight. Females fight to defend. And that doesn't mean that a male doesn't make a great, protection dog. It's just, you can see the look on their face. They're like, yeah, I'm just fighting because I like to fight. The females are almost more ferocious in their bite work because they're like, you're not hurting my person and I'm going to make sure of it. And so it's kind of like mama bear syndrome. They get that way with whoever they're bonded to. So when after they spend 6 or 8 weeks with a family, they're like, everybody in this family is mine and I'm protecting them from all the bad things that are out there. Also, male dogs tend to bond closer to female people and vice versa. Female dogs tend to bond closer to males. That's not a 100%, but it's probably 90% of the time. You'll notice that that's the case. Males can be, if you're going to have aggression issues with your dog, you almost always will have them with the males and almost never with the females. It's not that you won't, it's probably like 99 to 1%, right? So 1% of the females may try and give a little pushback on like you correct a female and she's like, don't correct me like that again. I want to do this thing and you better not tell me no. And you go, whack, foo it. I said, leave it. And then they go, okay, I just want to make sure you're in charge. Whereas a male you do that with, and he goes, yeah, let's have the fight and see who wins. Right. And now I try and create those situations when they're young. And because it's a lot easier to take a male and string him up and go, cut it out. Quit putting your teeth on me. And then put him back on the ground. And he goes, oh, I guess I shouldn't do that anymore. Whereas when they're 60 or 70 pounds, dealing with that problem is a lot more intensive. But so those are kind of your big differences. Your females, you rarely have aggression issues with. They bond tighter to men. Now, the thing is, you do have to deal with a heat cycle on a female unless you're going to spay her. Some people don't want to deal with that. If you have a place that you can put them, like a kennel or something like that, it's basically 2 weeks every 6 months. Mm-hmm. So it's not all the time. It's not every month or anything like that. And the dangerous time is when they stop bleeding. So about 4 days after they stop bleeding is when they're in full. We call that full. That's when they're actually wanting to be bred. So don't think, oh, they're done bleeding. Okay, we bring them around the other dogs again. they're actually the beginning of the heat cycle. The males will lose their mind over them, but
Mhm.
they won't let them breed them. The females won't allow it. It's that last couple days of the bleed, and then the 3 or 4 days after that when they're at full, and then they're like, "Hey, buddy, get up here," and they'll literally chase males around and pin them in a corner and be like, "You better get on me," and so that's kind of how they act. So if that throws your lifestyle off, like if you're in an apartment, that might be a problem. Then either getting her spayed or getting a male makes it a little more simple. But I've got apartment dwellers that get females and deal with it just fine.
To get maximum size out of a male, you don't want to fix him until he's 18 months, 2 years. Is that true?
That's typically what they say. All of my dogs stay intact unless there's a reason to not make them intact. And I tell my clients once they buy the dogs, I'm like, it's your dog now, you can deal with it. But what I've found is if you neuter or spay a dog, its protection work isn't affected too much. But if you do any kind of detection work, so like a lot of people get my dogs, and even if they don't pay for the upfront training, they're like, I want my dog to be able to track my kids, right? So they'll come to their follow-up training, and we'll spend a couple of days doing tracking, and then they go home and play hide and seek with the kids, and the dogs learn to track the kids. So any of that kind of work, detection of any kind, you tend to lose about 2 years of working life on the dog when you spay or neuter. The other thing you'll notice is if you have a pack of intact animals and you bring a non-intact animal into that group, that generally doesn't bode well for the non-intact, because the other animals know there's something wrong with you. You can't reproduce anymore. We should cull you from our group.
Oh, okay.
And so you can end up with issues that way as well. So either I go have everybody intact or nobody intact in a group. And if you do spay, like to me, there's really not a reason to neuter a male unless he's just breaking out and running off and going and chasing tail somewhere. For your females, the main reason that people do it is because they don't want to deal with the heat cycle, the bleeding cycle. And I understand those things. I just go, it's your dog, you make your decision, but here's my recommendations and why.
I think they can spay females without it being a hysterectomy too, which is a middle
They can
ground.
now. They just remove, I think it's the ovaries.
Yeah.
And rather than doing a full hysterectomy, they can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Burn them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, here's one from earlier from Jeremy. What happens to the animals that don't make the cut for protection?
They're all upstairs taxidermied in my collection.
Yeah. So I always will joke and I'll say people love our dogs, but they don't like the methods that we use to get the best dogs that we can produce. So here's how it works. And I'm not as hardcore about this as some people are. There are some guys that I know of that literally call half of every litter, regardless of how good that litter is. They're like, we're going to pick the best 4 from this 8 and the rest are getting culled. We do have a fairly ruthless culling program, though. If I am not willing to put my name on it and send it out, it does not leave my property. Now, sometimes we have people that work with us very closely that they're like, I want to take that dog and just make it my dog. And if we can do that, then that's great. But who's the guy? I don't think it's Darby Simpson. There's a guy who has a goat herd that is like in high demand, and he has no worming issues in his goats.
Judy.
And so I said, Greg Judy, there you go.
Greg Judy, yeah.
And in his interview with Jack, this was years ago, they said, how do you get your goats to not have problems with worms? And he said, ruthless culling. That's how you get strong animals. Ruthless culling. So when you have weakness, when you have dogs that can't handle it with their nerves, when you have dogs that aren't healthy, when you have dogs that have any issues, which we don't get a lot of, but when you do, they don't leave.
But if you're breeding good animals, you don't have that many problems. And Greg Judy,
Not that many.
so far, Greg Judy, if he has a goat get out once, he puts it back in. The goat gets out a second time, they kill that goat right then.
Yeah. No, we don't have those kinds of issues. Like dogs, the dogs that we breed they're super smart, right? And they're always kind of like, well, where's the line? Like, where's the don't cross this line thing? And if you're disciplined, it's easy to set that line and maintain it. But if you're inconsistent and you're like, well, sometimes the line's over here, but sometimes it's over here, then whichever the one that the dog's pushing into, they're always going to be like, but I want to get back over to when it was over there. And then they end up kind of just pushing and pushing and pushing. So when you take a dog like that and you put him in a kennel, and kennels are great for certain things and kennels are terrible for certain things. But when you have 40 dogs, you can't have 40 dogs running loose everywhere. So you have to have a way to contain them. And when you do that, they go, hey, there's not a lot to do in here. So I keep seeing you touch that thing and then come in and out. I'm going to mess with it and see if I can figure out how to open it myself.
Yeah.
Right. Or they get on a tie out And they're like, I noticed that whenever I come off the chain, you touch this thing right next to my neck. So I'm going to play. And that same female that just got bred, she can get off a tie out and out of a kennel run. And now our kennel runs now have clips that go on them so the latch won't open unless you unput it. But the standard snap links that are like what most people think of on the end of a lead, we have heavy duty ones of those. I have one tie out area that has that. And she can get up on top of the house and she gets it on the edge of the house and she pushes down and it pops off the collar and she's like, freedom. And she goes running around. So she has to be on the bull snap tie outs if she's going to go on a tie out. So that's they're smart and they're always kind of trying to figure things out. And you want to give them something to do. Even when they're contained in a space, here's a chew toy. Play with this. They play with each other under the kennel runs. And so sometimes I'll come in and one will be limping because they were playing underneath and then one of them bit their paw while it was under the other one and they jerked it back and kind of torqued it a little under the kennel or something like that. And it's just dealing with dogs, right? But when we have issues like that, we try to fix them first because most of those are just discipline and obedience issues. But if we have a genetic problem or we have a nerve problem where the dog's just doesn't have the confidence that it needs for some reason, it's just not getting it, then we don't sell cheap dogs or dogs that don't make the cut.
Yeah. Okay. Last question. Thoughts about food, raw, awful, all of that stuff.
So if you have the ability to do raw correctly, raw is the best. What do I mean by doing raw correctly? Animals, canines, do not primarily eat meat in the wild. They primarily eat the gut out of the animal. And then whatever's left after they finish what they want from the gut, they'll eat it if they need it. But so there's a reason that specifically canines don't eat any plant material, right? Now, if you have a diet that's lacking in things, sometimes they'll eat grasses and things like that to try and make up for it. But that's usually because your diet's lacking in something, or there's something in the grass or the soil that they're really in, like they want it, right? Like the soil around here is muck. And so the grass around here, even dogs that never eat grass, they're like, this grass is delicious. But if your dog is healthy, they generally won't look at the grasses as something they need to eat. So the reason they don't need that, though, is because they're getting the partially digested grass materials out of the gut of the animals that they're killing, whether that's a rabbit or a chicken or whether it's a deer, right? Now, only in packs do they kill larger things than that, like the elk and stuff like that. So if you're going to do raw, you do the entire animal, fur, feathers, and all. And they will consume the entire animal, fur, feathers, and all. And the fur and the feathers are their roughage. So when they poop out the fur and feathers, it will typically look like somebody put it into a pipe, twisted it through the pipe, and then it comes out kind of where it's like cleaning out the intestine as it goes through.
Like they ate a sock.
Yes. And it's good for them. All that process is good for them. They eat the bones and everything. Chicken bones that are not cooked are safe. Any cooked bone splinters when it breaks. The only reason people say cow bones are safe is because they're generally strong enough that the dogs don't break them when they're cooked. But if you leave a dog with bones to chew on like that, they will wear their canines down, and it causes tooth issues. So if you're going to give them something to chew on a lot, make it like the nyla bones and plastic things that don't damage their teeth. But and if you're going to feed them bones of animals they would kill and eat naturally, deer, sheep, and below. And all of them, like I give them forearms off the deers when I shoot them because there's no meat down there anyway, and they'll eat everything but the hoof. And they'll literally just break a piece of the bone off, crunch it up, and swallow it. So I give them the whole animal. Now you can supplement with raw, but just understand how a dog's digestive system works. If you give them something new, they will get ejection diarrhea for a couple days. Right? If your dogs are outside loose, that's probably not a problem. Just don't freak out when it happens. If your dogs are inside, that's going to be a mess. Also, trying to put raw feed on a floor, like in a house, if you're feeding them inside. Also, a lot of people are like, that's gross. I don't want to do that. Which is why kibble is popular. There are multiple kibbles out there that are good. The ones that say grain-free are crap. And here's why. The only way to get dehydrated meat to stick together in what appears to be a dry kibble is to put some kind of plant material in it. And so what they do when they replace the grain is they use peas and other things like that, and they actually are harmful to the dogs. They hurt their heart and things like that. Okay, so corn is not great, but corn, they don't digest it. It just passes through their system, and so the more corn there is, the less nutrient there is. So you want the higher quality foods are darker because there's less corn in them. right? Now they can do rice and some other things like that, but all of those materials have the same effect on the dog. They just pass through their system, right? So I like Victor brand dog food. I don't get sponsored by them or anything. I just have a wholesale account with them, and I really like their foods. We use a couple supplements. If you go over to my live feed last week, I actually go over the 2 supplements that we use. We have one that's a weight gainer for the young dogs, and we have one that's like a probiotic, kind of a gut health thing. And we mix those together, and we put a little diatomaceous earth in there, a little scoop of that, and mix it all together and feed it to the dogs, and they love it. The DE helps kind of keep the worms in their system down. Also, if you do raw, especially if you do wild raw, like you give your dog something from a deer or something like that's been out wild, they will get wormy. They're going to get wormy anyway, and you have to kind of take care of worms, but they will get especially wormy from those animals because those animals were wormy. So they're like getting the worms directly into their system from those other animals.
Yeah, it seems like if you're going to transition to raw, you could also do some kibble and some raw and avoid some of the violent diarrhea issues. So
what I like to do is I like to incorporate it occasionally. So we have a freeze dryer, and so we get the 10-pound bags of chicken when they're on sale, and they're like $2.50 for a 10-pound bag. And I'm like, buy every bag they have in the store. So we walk out with a couple shopping carts full of chicken, and then we run it through a meat grinder. And then we take liver, tripe, any organs that we can get. And my friend gets his deer processed at a place that most of the people don't want the organs. So I'm like, bring back everything you can. So he brings us back all these organs, and we run them through with him and then mix it all together. Canned pumpkin, like pureed pumpkin, seems to help stabilize a dog's gut. It's not like 100% depending on how big the shift is, but it helps a lot. And so we actually put like 1 can of pumpkin in a big bowl of this stuff and mix it all together, and then we spread it in our freeze dryer trays or make patties, or we're trying to get some forms now that we can make them into like squares or circles. But and then we run them through the freeze dryer, then they store with that refrigeration, and then I can throw 1 or 2 of those in with their kibble. And if you can do that consistently, that's a real good supplement to add into their diets.
So a lot of places, a lot of rescues use pumpkin because it's inexpensive and it's an expander and fills the dog up, makes it feel full. Freeze drying those, are you hydrating them before you give them, or just giving them just?
So we use the freeze dried stuff for puppies, and when we feed puppies, we hydrate them first. Okay. Well, when I say hydrate them, what I do, they're like little patties when you get them out, right? So I crush the patty up and to where it's like kind of like kibble size, and then I just basically pour water over it. I put a little DE in there to mix in with them. I just use a fork or a spoon and just kind of mix it around so everything's wet. And then I feed it to them. So I don't sit there and wait 10 minutes for it to fully rehydrate. But at least the moisture and the meat is there together so that they're consuming it all together, and it's not sucking the moisture out of their body trying to rehydrate once they get it in their system.
Awesome. So my big dog, I have a Kangal, a male, and we feed raw rabbits, whole rabbits. And I don't even have to cut the gut anymore to get him to eat them. He'll just eat them. My females, I got to cut the gut a little bit still to get one of them to eat them. And then I have a commercial freezer. So I pull like frostbite chickens out from the year earlier or whatever, and I'll just set them in a Rubbermaid tub the night before, and then we'll just feed the big dogs. We just give them whole chickens, and they eat them. And then the next day when we give them food, they don't eat nearly as much. They tend to go, 2-3 days on a meal like that.
When we were feeding chicken, we would feed half a chicken every other day. And what we would do is we keep them in a deep freezer. So I used to have a supply at an egg laying place, one of the big egg laying places, and they'd lose 10-12 chickens a day. So I'd go over once or twice a week and come back with the back of my truck full of chickens. I'd throw them in deep freezers, and then I pull a chicken out. I take a hatchet and a wood cutting stump, and I go whack, and it splits in 2. And so when it's frozen solid, you just hit it with an axe or a hatchet, and it breaks in 2 pieces. And I throw half to that one and half to that one, and I just cut however many I need to and throw them out to the dogs. And they eat them frozen. It's like chicken sickles. And it doesn't bother them at all.
K-Bonk says Pro. I'm assuming he means Purina Pro plan. That's what I use too. For our,
I've heard good things about that.
We use chicken rice, and then if you're not aware, it's becoming very hard to get. We were buying it for $50 a bag a year ago. It's $75, $79 a bag now. So if you've got a butcher, they throw away liver, they throw away hearts for the most part. When they cut meat, on the backside of the saw, it's all bone marrow and meat
Mhm.
fragments and bone, and that stuff is great too. They brought it to us to feed chickens, but we use that paste to feed to the dogs, and you can cube it up and do all kinds of stuff with it.
And if you've got, so the local butchers can sell you scrap parts. A lot of times there's something about being federally licensed or whatever that they can't sell the scraps. But a lot of your local butchers, like if they butcher deer and things like that for people, if you bring them 5-gallon buckets, they will usually just throw the scraps in the 5-gallon buckets for you, and then you can just come pick them up and drop off more empty 5-gallon buckets.
Yep.
And that is a great source for raw. Now, the one thing to keep in mind is you may or may not be getting much of the gut.
Yes.
So you're probably getting organs in there. Some of them are willing to put at least a portion of the gut in there for you. But if they're not getting that, then you do need to do some kind of supplemental something so that they're getting, because the gut is their primary source of nutrient. So they're getting calorie from all the other stuff, but the nutrient itself is like, that's their replacement for the green material that we and other animals eat.
By gut, do you mean intestines or
Yes.
all of it?
Entrails.
Just
And
to
you
be-
don't want it squeezed out either. I mean, it stinks. So when you're doing this, you're dealing with, and dogs, sometimes if you throw an animal down for a dog, especially if they're on a tie out or in a kennel or something like that, they will wait for it to start rotting before they eat it. And if they're doing that, it's probably because they need the bacteria that comes with that rot. And so when you feed dogs raw, you will get used to the smell of a dog farm. And it's a little bit different than the smell of other farms, but it involves rotting and feces. And so you kind of grow to love the smell of a farm if you work it a lot. And if you're not used to it, though, it's like, ooh, this is stinky. So just kind of keep that in mind.
The first thing he wants to rub himself all over it. And he wants to take it and throw it up in the air a few times, and then he wants to take it and bite it.
Yep. One other thing to keep in mind with raw, if you have dogs that you can put a big bowl of food down and they'll both eat out of it, that's great. Do not think they'll do that when you put raw meat down. They will get in fights over raw anything.
Yep.
And so you need to contain them in their own spaces and give them their stuff. Even though all my dogs are contained, when I put raw out, so sometimes I just grab these chicken pieces. I'm like, we don't have time to freeze these and we need room in the freezer. I'll just go and toss chicken in all their areas. Even though they know the other dog can't reach it, they will stand over it and they will
hair comes up, hackles,
back and forth. And it takes them a while to eat it because they feel like they have to defend it against all the other dogs. So just that's something to be very cautious of if you do raw, is dogs typically don't play well with others when they're eating raw.
Right. All right. Well, Joel, thanks for making time today. Let's just go over how people can connect with you if they want to, watch some of your live streams or maybe talk about you transporting a dog up in June or something of that nature, or training, all the things you can do.
Well, the best place to reach us is fortresscanine.com. Thank you, Living Free in Tennessee, for putting that up there. And we are also, though, on Instagram at fortresscanine, at fortresscanine.puppies. And if you have a dog already and want training help, at Canine Academy Online is our online training course. It's a video-based course with Facebook group support. So you get access to a private Facebook group. And if you need problems there, we can help you. And we make videos for specific things if you need it. And so that's Facebook and Instagram. We're on YouTube at Fortress Canine. We're on Odyssey at Fortress Canine, MeWe, and Float. And all of those, if you search for Fortress Canine there, you should be able to find us. If you're listening to this, you're probably on the Survival Podcast pages. I'm fairly active in there, so you can see me and click on and follow me over in that space.
What about training? What about training dogs that are not like Shepherd, Malinois kind of dogs?
Well, so in our training classes that we have here locally, we have all kinds of different breeds. I've had everything from mini dachshunds and poodles to Black Russian Terriers. About the only thing I don't allow on site is the wolf crosses because wolves are not dogs. They're all canines, but wolves don't bond to humans. And when people try to cross that in, they generally create problematic animals. And so unless you're bringing me a wolf pup, like a wolf cross pup, and we can start it from a pup, we'll give that a try. But usually the people that want to come to me are, I'm having a problem with my dog. Can you help me? Not if it's a wolf cross. But other than that, we work with a lot of different people. As long as you're willing to put in the work, we will help you. We have a Great Dane training with us right now. And so she had a few little issues when she came. And at first I was like, well, I don't know if she's going to do her part, but she worked and worked and worked. And now she calls him Abraham Lincoln, and she has to say his whole name every time she calls him. But great client, and she's doing just amazing with him. So we work with all kinds of different breeds, and the methods work on everybody.
So maybe you don't want to discuss this public. Have you had a dog bite people?
One of my dogs?
Yeah.
So we have had our dogs used in numerous defensive situations, but they've never had to go to the point of biting. So all of the people, when they've gotten in that situation, are like, yeah, never mind, I don't want anything to do with this, and they've de-escalated and walked away. We've never had an errant bite. So I mentioned that earlier, and again, like knock on wood, just to make sure. But I've never had somebody call me and say, yeah, my dog bit somebody it wasn't supposed to. And in terms of other people's dogs on fields, we've had some close calls. But as long as people follow my instructions, and I'm pretty militant on my field, like it's funny because I have almost all women, right? Like there might be 2 male clients, and everybody else have 20 people on the field, and it's like 18 women and 2 guys. And I'm like, you will do this, or I will do it for you, or you will leave. It's like those are your options. And when we have new clients, I'm like, you need to understand, if your dog is aggressive toward other dogs, I will do whatever it takes to correct this dog, up to and including stabbing it to death in front of you if you're not going to do your job. If you're not cool with that, I understand there's the gate, you can leave. And I'll say this, sometimes I get like 5 or 6 new clients all at once, and I give this talk, and I'm like, why aren't any of you leaving? Like somebody should be so upset by that statement that you should leave right now. What is wrong with you people? Okay, but we do a lot of training with all kinds of different breeds, and as long as people are willing to put in the work, the methodologies work. It is work. That's why they call it handling and not having. I meant
more like during an attack, has the dog, justifiably bit a bad guy. I haven't had that yet. We build harnesses and leashes and a little bit of canine stuff. So anytime we meet a canine officer, I'm like, hey, show me the pictures. And he's like, are you sure? Yeah. I go, yeah, show me. Because a lot of people don't realize, a lot of those dogs, when they eat that meat, like when that meat comes out of the wound, there's nothing left to sew that shit back up when that guy goes to the hospital.
Yeah. Well, and that's so a lot of people are like, why do your dogs reverse on arms? And like none of the sport dogs are trained to do that. Most of the sports were built based on the needs of law enforcement. They were tests that law enforcement dogs used as like their confirmation to certify, and then civilians started participating in them. And so for a law enforcement dog, they don't want that dog creating more damage than it needs to, because they want to avoid lawsuits, and they want to be able to justify the use of force even in a lawsuit and say, no, our dog didn't do an excessive thing. We were justified in this. If the dog has ripped up both arms and half of a leg, that's hard to justify. If you as an individual person are being attacked by somebody, it's easy to justify. Yeah. So the law enforcement dogs, they want them to bite and hold, and it hurts, and they do get a good chunk sometimes out of that muscle, but that is less damage than a dog that's fighting a human. Because like if you ever watch our videos on Instagram, especially is where I post most of the videos, they hit and they thrash back. And now in a suit, they're just thrashing, and then they'll reposition their legs and they'll thrash again. But if you don't have a suit on, when they insert those canines and they thrash through, they rip through that muscle, and then they come up and hit again, and they rip through that muscle, and they come up and hit again, and they rip through that muscle, and they do it over and over again. And so in a lot of the sports, they want the dogs to drive into the bite. And the reason they do that is because it's less damage. It causes less damage to the person being bit. If the dog pulls out of the bite, they rip, and then they hit and rip and hit and rip. And so either you'll see our dogs lunging back with their back legs like that and pulling back, or they thrash back and forth. And in either of those situations, you're creating a lot of damage, which is why it's also important that when you say, out, let's go, that dog stops. Because if somebody starts getting bit by one of these dogs, most of the time they just want it to end. Even I put new guys in the suit, and they're like, oh yeah, I want to do it. And then they start getting bit, and they're like, I want it to end right now. This hurts. And I'm like, yeah, imagine that without having all the equipment on.
So I want dogs. Like if you come on my property over the fences, I just want to come home and be like, what is this blood stain here? And there's nothing left. I don't want to. So I don't even want to know what happened.
Yeah. We call those perimeter security dogs. They're not hard to train. What we normally do on those dogs is, like most of the people that have wanted them in the past are guys who have like RV lots, and things of that nature. And so when they shut down for the evening, they basically release the dog into the area. And so you need a couple things. You need to make sure your area is well secured so that your perimeter security dog's not getting out. There's a process of showing the dog the perimeter. And so we can train the dog as a perimeter security dog, but then when they get to a new location, they have to learn that new perimeter. And then we typically let them bond and get used to that for a couple of months. And then we come back and we break in. And so, by breaking in, we go over the fence, or a lot of times we work on the outside of the fence the first couple of times, like we'll shake it and make noise. And then the dogs come up, and we run off to another spot and shake the fence over there. And so the dogs get real suspicious of what's out there. And then we come over the fence and let the dogs come and start hitting us. And then, so the pros and cons of that. The pro of that is you can leave those dogs in your property and ain't nobody coming in that property that's walking out uninjured. The con of that is if you have people coming over that you want there, those dogs have to be put away. Yeah. So having like a 10 by 10 kennel or a kennel built for them that, when they're not on work, they go there and that's their safe house that they live in. And then when, the event is over or whatever, then they come back out and you'll see when after an event, like I'll go through the process with you if you're interested in something like that, but we build suspicion. So after the event is over, first of all, while it's going on, you make sure they can't see anybody that's in the event. They can't see people on your property. They can hear it and they know there's activity out there, but they can't see anybody. And then as soon as it's over, I release the kennels and I'm like, where are they? Where have they been? Who's been here? And we run around the property searching and checking the property. And then after we search everything, we go, okay, it's safe. And then they're even more like, nobody better freaking come on our property. So it's a great thing to have for its purpose, but it's something that you just got to understand once you do it, it's done and you're not undoing that in those dogs. So as long as people, understand that, it's we help them out with doing that. We have every once in a while we have a client that wants that in their house and they're like, I want to bite first, ask questions later, dog in the house. And usually they say that and I explain what I just explained and they go, never mind, I don't want that.
Yeah, no, bad idea.
But every once in a while they're like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
What about, is it easy to deter those dogs just through like hot dogs?
You can poison proof those dogs.
Okay.
Yeah. So what we do, it's a process that we go through, and it's usually one we need to go through on property. But basically, we throw food to the dog, and then the handler communicates to the dog. If somebody tries to feed you, eat them. And so the people trying to feed you are bad guys. And it's a similar process to how we train guard an object. So if you're training guard an object, whether it's a child or whether it's a briefcase or something like that, whenever the person comes near the object, the handler communicates to the dog, bite them if they touch it. But if they don't touch it, it's leave it alone, it's okay. The minute they touch it, take. And then you as you condition the dog that the cue for me to take is when they touch the item, then they will now guard. Now you can take an object and put it in front of them and go guard that. And they'll go, nobody better touch that or I'm going to eat them. So you do a similar process with the food. You go, if they feed you, attack them. And so that way they can't do something like take a steak and soak it in radiator fluid and throw it over your fence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we have this conversation a lot at night. People know I have dogs, they have dogs. And a lot of our conversations are around kind of civil unrest, fall of civilization kind of stuff. And I say that, what I want to say is that the dog, while it gives you security, it's kind of a false sense of security, because if things truly are that bad, they're just going to shoot the dogs. Like, especially if you're on a big piece of property, the dogs, like my male is going to go wherever he's going to know before you are on the property, he's going to know you're there. My females are going to stay further back. But if it's truly a bad guy, I mean, that's what the first thing cops do is always just shoot the dogs. I mean, bad guys would do the same things.
Yeah. So what you have to watch there is if you're looking at an infiltration type situation, is you have layers of dogs, just like you have layers of defense.
Yes.
So you have dogs that are always with you and they're always there. So worst case, if that dog gets shot, they're right beside you when it happens. And now you're like, react to contact situation. If you, so you have the dogs that are always with you. Then you have the dogs that are like household yard dogs that are close to the house and aren't going very far. You can condition dogs too to deploy out after gunfire, and that's actually really easy to condition them for. And so basically, you hear a gunshot, you go attack that gunshot, and you can train them for suppressed weapons as well, because the dog is hearing all of the sounds that the rifle is making, and so they can be conditioned to any of those sounds. It doesn't have to be a blast from a muzzle.
Awesome.
And so then you have 3 or 4 dogs. They might take them all out, but again, once dogs are turned on, it's easy when they're standing around, mulling around, laying and chilling, to sneak up and shoot them if you're, good at sneaking up on things. But once they're switched on, they become a lot harder to shoot, right? And typically dogs don't, when the target is a far way off, when somebody's close, they go like straight into the person, right? When you're a far way off, they almost always like loop out and then come in from the side, almost like a flanking maneuver. And so in any kind of high grass or woods or anything like that, where that person might be hiding while they're doing this, they're going to lose sight of those dogs pretty quick. Mm-hmm. And then they'll hear them coming, but they're moving when they're coming through those woods. And so you may hear something over there. It might be 1, it might be 3. And so you have those dogs, and then you have your perimeter security dogs that they spend most of their time out and around on the perimeter. Can they be shot? Yeah, but a lot of what they're doing, especially if you periodically, like every 3 months, do a follow-up, and you could do this with like one of your guys that doesn't mind jumping in the suit for you, is, just go, hey, tonight you want to come break in? Yeah, it sounds awesome, man. All right, come on over. And you're just around enough that when he starts yelling, you can come out and call him off so that he's not out there for 15 minutes fighting dogs. Because it is like a fight, like 1 or 2 minutes, and you're pretty burnt out, especially if you're not used to it.
So I don't know about like bite dogs and stuff, but like livestock guardian dogs, they operate as packs. You'll have 3, like there's a bunch of thermal footage and night vision footage of Kangol's Turkish mountain dogs coming around on wolves and stuff, and coming around on bears, and they hit them from multiple angles.
Yep. So if you want dogs to work together, you want them to start training them from pups to work together. And we used to train what they call kill teams. So you train a dog on legs, you train a dog on arms, and then you train 2 of the dogs on arms. But what happens is the first dog that gets there and hits arms, they generally are the lead hitter. And then the second dog comes in and hits legs. And when you have a dog yanking one of your legs out from under you while another dog is torquing on your arms, it's very difficult to stay on your feet. And so then when they go to the ground, all the dogs come in and start hitting face and neck. Mm-hmm. And that happens really quickly. So each of these groups that we were talking about should probably, you can go overboard with anything. One protection dog is great for a person who's moving with the dog all the time. But if you truly want to secure a property, then you probably have 2 kill team perimeter dogs that are good as a group overall. But then these dogs, this group was trained together and this group was trained together. And then you have 1 or 2 close to the house. And then, you, your wife, and one of your older children or whatever, each have a dog that are used to deploying together. And if you have something like that, you create a situation where you may lose a dog or 2 in a real true assault, but you're probably going to come out ahead.
So this is a conversation that I have never heard anywhere, and I've looked for it. So maybe this should be put together in a presentation of some manner, because at least my clients, and I'm not a dog dude, I'm not trying to sell dogs. I just would like someplace when they ask me these questions that we could direct them. And I know people are hungry, especially in this environment right now with things going on, and everybody's kind of leaving the cities, moving rural, setting up perimeters, and they have some shit to guard. This is a great conversation to have.
Yeah. And it can be really, really expensive, or you can do something like buy 1 trained dog, right, and get it at a higher level of training. So you got a real good start, and then get 2 or 3 pups. And, whether you get them all at once or you space them out, depending on how much time you have to work with them, and you bring those pups up alongside that trained dog. And then once everybody's kind of foundationally trained and the puppies are 6 or 8 months old, you come and do like a week of training. Or I come up to you and we do a week of training, because we do a week, it's worth, paying for the travel and everything. And then we do that bite work and introduce, and we use the advanced dog to bring the younger dogs into the bite work. Now they've all been raised together. They're all familiar with each other. You're not having aggression issues with them, and you paid for 1, but you end up getting 4. You had to do a lot of the work yourself. Wow. But if you have more time than money, that's the best way to do it. Yeah. I often tell my clients, if you have more money than time, buy a trained dog. If you have more time than money, buy either a lower trained dog or a puppy, and then come spend a lot of time getting all this foundation in, and then come and we can bring your dog out and bite work.
The more of this you have, the less of this you have to have. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah. Cool. Well, again, guys, thanks for making time. We'll look forward to seeing you in person, Joel, in June at Self Reliance
Outstanding.
Festival. Maybe we can
Yep.
have this conversation there and record it if that's helpful.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
that'd be awesome.
Yeah. All right.
Excellent. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.